Welcome back to Mystic Universe. Dear viewers, when people mention cigars and economic embargoes, which country usually comes to mind? Who else could it be? Cuba, of course. A place famous not only for its legendary cigars, but also for images of passionate music, classic cars, and beautiful, captivating women, many of whom are pushed into difficult choices just to make a living. So what is real life in Cuba actually like? How harsh is it? And how different is it from what we often imagine? Right now, let's join Mystic Universe as we explore the reality of everyday life in Cuba through this video. When you think of Cuba, what's the first thing that comes to mind? An economic embargo, vintage cars, or a country seemingly frozen in time for decades? Cuba is a long island stretching about 1,250 kilometers, around 780 miles, across turquoise waters between the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Caribbean Sea. Shaped like a giant crocodile, it is even larger than Portugal, covering roughly 109,884 square kilometers, about 42,400 square miles. This is Cuba, home to around 11 million people, scattered across mountains, rolling plains, vast sugarcane fields, and limestone valleys. The country's economy relies heavily on tourism and the export of sugar and tobacco. However, decades of U.S. economic sanctions have severely restricted imports. Here, January 1st is not only New Year's Day, it is also Cuba's National Independence Day. Everyday life in Cuba truly reflects its spirit, doing everything in its own way. Under a centralized economy, most people still work for the state, earning about $15 to $20 per month, with lifetime job security. However, they constantly struggle to survive on this tiny income in a reality where living costs keep rising. Most Cubans get around on foot or squeeze onto overcrowded buses, where you may have to wait through 4 or 5 full buses before finally getting on. Meanwhile, street vendors sell all kinds of things, from snacks to small buckets made from recycled paint cans. On Cuban streets, you won't find convenience stores, fashion boutiques, or electronic shops. They simply don't exist. Walking through the narrow alleys of central Havana, you'll see large piles of garbage sitting untouched due to the lack of a modern waste management system. Of course, there's a smell. The tropical heat makes sure of that. But people still stand around chatting, laughing, or singing as if it were part of daily life. According to reports from the Cuban government, starting in November 2024, more than 99,000 households in Havana, Artemisa, and Mayabeque have lost access to cooking gas because the country can no longer import this energy source. In other parts of Cuba, about 735,000 customers face the same problem. On top of that, prolonged power outages, lasting up to nearly 20 hours a day, have become common, drawing widespread complaints. One young man says that on some days, electricity is available for only 6 hours, sometimes just 4 hours. A young woman confirms the same, adding that in tourist-heavy areas, power outages are less frequent. Because this situation has become routine, some people invest in diesel-powered generators. However, fuel is extremely expensive, so not everyone can afford one. Walking through the streets at night, you'll often see only car headlights. Everything else is pitch dark. Meanwhile, food, fuel, and medicine are in severe shortage. Many basic goods can only be found on the black market, where prices are 5 to 10 times higher than official rates. People wait in long lines for hours, surviving on limited supplies and using creativity to get by, from growing vegetables in small gardens to reusing and recycling old items. It's common to see Cubans digging through trash bins for plastic bottles, paper, or crushing empty cans to sell. Those with an artistic soul may earn a little extra by performing music right on the street. In response to this situation, Cuba's National Assembly has issued statements condemning the U.S. embargo, claiming it causes losses of around $6 billion per year. Walking down the street, you quickly notice how old the houses are, faded colors, peeling paint, and little to no renovation. Many buildings have been abandoned, yet people still live inside them, even after authorities have ordered evacuations due to the risk of collapse. Another striking feature is the heavy presence of political banners. Images of Fidel Castro still appear prominently on large billboards along major roads, often accompanied by slogans like, "Down with imperialism." At movie theaters, you can still watch a few famous American blockbusters, but most screenings feature Cuban films. Children usually watch movies at home via television, satellite antennas, or offline video packages, because internet access remains very limited. Even movie schedules are printed out and posted on walls. Leaving the theater, we head to a bank and see long lines of people waiting, sometimes hundreds at a time. The reason is simple. ATMs frequently run out of cash. So, people wait, some standing, some sitting, patiently passing the time. And do you want to know what a ration-based system really looks like? In Vietnam, it's long gone, but in Cuba, it still exists today. This is the country that has faced sanctions longer than any other on Earth, under an embargo since 1959. It is also one of the last nations still operating a fully centralized economy based on a food ration system introduced in 1962. More than 11 million people still depend on a tiny ration booklet called the Libreta de Abastecimiento to survive. Monthly rations typically include about 4.4 pounds of rice, 8.8 pounds of black beans, roughly 3.2 ounces of chicken, and 4.4 pounds of sugar. Infants receive around 1 liter of milk per month, about 34 fluid ounces. Everything else must be purchased at state-controlled prices, assuming those goods are even available. Private businesses are strictly limited, and anyone caught illegally slaughtering cattle can face 15 to 20 years in prison. This is because livestock are considered essential national assets for milk production and agriculture. Here is a state-run store where a man is rushing to bake bread for a long line of people waiting outside. One loaf of bread costs about 600 Vietnamese dong, which is roughly $0.02. Each family member is allowed to buy only one loaf. So, if a household has 4 people, they can buy 4 loaves, no more. Customers must bring their own plastic bags, and every purchase is stamped in their ration booklet to prevent hoarding. You quickly realize that without this booklet, people simply cannot buy rice, while black market prices are extremely high. That's why you rarely see overweight people here. Honestly, if anyone wants to lose weight, just try living in Cuba for a year. All sadness may pass, except the daily bathroom sadness. And once you're done, you suddenly realize that toilet paper is almost non-existent in Cuba. Open a trash bin and you'll find piles of old newspapers. Yes, people often use newspapers or torn book pages instead. This issue has even been turned into satirical cartoons. One glance at the character wearing a familiar hat, and you know exactly which country is being criticized. Another major issue is technology. In Cuba, TikTok doesn't work, ChatGPT isn't accessible, and iPhones face many restrictions. Even if you tap the App Store dozens of times to download games, update Facebook, or install banking apps, you'll often get a message saying the service is blocked due to geographic restrictions. That's why, as this young woman explains, most Cubans switch to Android phones, which make it easier to install apps without needing a VPN. A young man confirms the same. For iPhones, people usually turn to repair shops scattered across the city to get them unlocked. These technicians, often wearing shirts with an Apple logo, install special VPNs, download apps to a computer, and then transfer them to the phone. And those shop logos, pretty shocking. One called Addict looks suspiciously similar to Adidas. So what about you? Are you using iOS or Android? Share your answer in the comments, and let's see which side has more fans. And if you want to rent a car in Cuba to explore the island, be prepared. It's almost a mission impossible. You may have to wait 3 days just to get a vehicle. And once you finally do, refueling becomes another challenge altogether. You'll need to join a Telegram group, take a number, and wait your turn. Sometimes it takes up to a week before you're allowed to buy gas, under the supervision of a police officer, who makes sure you receive exactly the amount you registered for. And no filming is allowed. It's hard to say whether this reflects gender bias or not, but in Cuba, even at gas stations, there are separate tip boxes for men and women. In reality, the box for men is usually much fuller, while the one for women is almost empty. Gas stations also have indoor payment counters with cashiers, where POS machines are available, but you'll have to accept higher fees. As night falls, the atmosphere in Cuba begins to change. Around 10 p.m., Havana starts to reveal a very different side of itself. The red light district looks rather quiet and subdued. A few women smile and wave at men passing by, sometimes inviting them closer and even leading them to see their rooms. When someone says, "At least a place to sleep isn't too bad," you can probably guess what that really means. The rooms themselves are simple, cramped, and filled with mismatched furniture. Upstairs on a small loft, the bed is carefully pointed out. Here's Jessica, for example. She seems quite casual and carefree, walking over to ask for a beer, explaining that she hasn't had one in a long time and doesn't have money to buy it. Soon after, she shifts her attention to a foreign visitor, chatting openly and warmly, her gestures and eye contact friendly and inviting. A few minutes later, they head off together briefly. What exactly happens is left unsaid. Shortly after, both return. The man hands her some money. They exchange goodbyes and go their separate ways. Maybe she just helped him buy something, right? That's enough of a quick walk through the streets. Now it's time to discover how Cuba's legendary cigars are made. If there is one Cuban craft considered a sacred heritage, it is cigar making. And there is no place more iconic, no place that does it better, than Havana, where factories produce some of the finest cigars in the world. These luxury cigars are exported to more than 150 countries and remain a symbol of handcrafted excellence that no machine has ever been able to truly replicate. Everything begins in Pinar del Rio, a region so perfect for growing tobacco that local farmers jokingly say it raises tobacco leaves better than it raises children. From planting to harvest, every single tobacco leaf is treated as a valuable investment, because even the smallest mistake can ruin an entire cigar. After harvesting, the leaves are hung for 45 to 60 days inside tall wooden curing barns. There, workers manually adjust wooden panels to carefully control humidity and airflow. This slow process allows the leaves to soften, deepen in flavor, and release rich aromas before moving on to fermentation. Fermentation is a natural chemical process. The leaves are bundled and stacked together, where they generate heat on their own, release ammonia, and gradually develop the deep, complex aroma that people around the world recognize as the distinctive Cuban character. Next, the leaves are sorted by texture, flexibility, and sheen. A proper Cuban cigar requires 3 filler leaves inside and a single flawless wrapper leaf on the outside. Naturally, only the most beautiful and perfect leaves are chosen for this final roll. Seated at the rolling tables are the torcedores, master cigar rollers. And here's something interesting. Women are often preferred for the critical task of handling the wrapper leaves. The reason? They are believed to be less prone to color blindness and far better at distinguishing subtle shades between dark brown and light brown than men. With nothing more than a single blade, a bit of natural vegetable glue, and muscle memory built over many years of practice, they roll the filler, bind it together, add the flawless wrapper leaf, and place each cigar into a wooden mold. These molds are then pressed for about 20 minutes. Not too tight and not too loose. Just firm enough to hold the shape, but never so tight that the cigar can't be properly smoked. Once shaped, the cigars enter Cuba's famously strict 2-stage quality control system. In the first room, machines test the airflow and internal pressure of each cigar. Any cigar that fails is torn apart and must be rolled again from scratch. Next comes the final inspection, where highly experienced workers examine each cigar by hand, checking its size, firmness, structure, and especially the uniformity of color, using only eyes trained over many years. Every bundle of cigars carries a code linked directly to the individual roller. If a defect is found, the entire batch is sent back to that worker to be redone. Only after passing all these demanding steps are the cigars moved into cedar aging rooms, where they rest for weeks or even months, slowly absorbing aroma and depth of flavor. Eventually, they are banded, boxed, and shipped around the world as a product truly born of Cuban soil. This patience and craftsmanship have remained largely unchanged for nearly 100 years. There's one more fascinating detail. Cuban cigar factories still employ lectors, people who sit at the front of the workshop and read newspapers, novels, and political essays aloud to the workers. This tradition dates back to the 1800s, created to inform and entertain cigar rollers during long working hours. Some even believe this is why certain cigar brands are named after literary heroes, because workers spent their days listening to these stories while rolling tobacco leaves. And do you know what's one of the most striking things about Cuba? Something you really won't see anywhere else. It's the kingdom of classic cars. If you love vintage automobiles, Cuba is truly a paradise. Officially, the country has two main types of cars on the road. First are modern Chinese sedans, mostly used as taxis or government vehicles, easy to recognize by the blue stripe running down their license plates. The second type, and the real icons, are the legendary American classic cars from the 1950s. It's estimated that around 60,000 classic cars are still in daily use across Cuba. You'll spot old Volkswagens, German Opels, Fords, Dodges, and Chevrolets from the United States. Many of these cars are decades old, yet locals do everything possible to keep them running, repairing, modifying, and even replacing parts with components imported from Russia. And honestly, these cars are incredibly colorful. Warm tones, cool tones, bright paint jobs, you name it. Even convertibles, which would be considered luxury vehicles in most countries, are commonly used as taxis in Cuba. That alone already feels special. There are even multi-seat taxis and buses that look so old you might think they belong in a museum rather than on the street. Step inside one of these vehicles, and you'll find that it's usually still clean, though everything is faded with time. The driver's seat, in particular, often looks extremely worn. Even so, public transportation isn't cheap. A bus ride can cost up to $2.50 per hour, which is quite high by local standards. To put that into perspective, a fully qualified doctor in Cuba earns only about $22 per month. Because of this, many professionals are forced to take on extra work, cleaning, babysitting, or doing manual labor, just to make ends meet. In Cuba, those beautiful old cars aren't just nostalgia on wheels. They're a symbol of survival, creativity, and a way of life unlike anywhere else in the world. Back to the classic cars. From bright blue to sunshine yellow, try finding anything like these in other countries. You won't. These cars are uniquely Cuban, found nowhere else in the world. You'll even come across some truly unusual vehicles, like the Coco taxi. It's a small, round, three-wheeled taxi that looks a bit like a giant shiny helmet. There's one seat for the driver in front, and 3 seats for passengers in the back. The woven canopy is just enough to shield both the driver and passengers from the sun. Think of it as an upgraded version of a 3-wheel motorbike taxi. And yes, even though it's a taxi, helmets are still required. The fare is around $2 per kilometer, converted from about 50,000 VND. Not surprisingly, taxi brokers are everywhere. They appear almost magically, waving down a ride for you, and then expecting a commission, sometimes from you, sometimes from the driver, and sometimes from both. Another common form of transport is a motorbike with a small sidecar attached for passengers. The downside? These little vehicles produce a lot of exhaust, so anyone riding behind them ends up breathing in plenty of smoke. And yes, horse-drawn carriages are still used as public transportation in Cuba, not just for tourist attractions or racetracks. They can easily carry up to 6 passengers. If you see the word taxi painted boldly on the side, you can hop on and off you go. As fuel prices in Cuba have surged, with a 40-liter tank of gas costing more than the average monthly salary of a government employee, Havana streets are slowly changing. More people are switching to bicycles and electric motorbikes. So far, around 300,000 electric vehicles are estimated to be in use across the island. These aren't brands like Vespa or VinFast. Most of them come from China, and the prices are steep. Many electric motorbikes cost between $2,000 and $5,000, while similar models in other countries sell for about $1,000, roughly $1,000 US. As a result, most low-income Cubans still can't afford one. And even if they could, there's another problem. Electricity is unreliable. Power cuts are common, making it difficult to charge these vehicles consistently. In Cuba, transportation isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's a daily challenge shaped by creativity, scarcity, and resilience. Finally, let's take a look at real life in rural Cuba. After arriving in the countryside and interviewing local residents, everyone shared the same story. Life is extremely difficult, and people are still struggling just to survive day by day. Over the past 5 years, living conditions have become much harder. Many residents say that back in the 1980s, healthcare was better, the economy was more stable, and life felt less stressful. Today, almost everyone agrees that things are getting worse, not better. Yet in the middle of all this hardship, only in Cuba will you see something so unusual. Luxury-looking cars being used to transport rice, grass, and crops in their trunks. It's a surreal contrast. Horses are also a very common means of transportation. As one local man explained, riding a horse is easy for them. On the small rural roads, most men choose horses because it's faster and less exhausting than walking. Motorbikes and bicycles are rare in the countryside. When they arrive at their destination, they simply tie the horse to any nearby tree to keep it from wandering off. Most houses are single-story homes, and the roads are very quiet. Children freely play outside because traffic is almost non-existent. Occasionally, you might see a truck carrying wood or a motorbike passing by, but most of the time, the roads are completely empty. What you see the most are hills and mountains. You'll often come across chickens running freely on the roads. And, as the locals like to joke, free-range chickens usually mean better-tasting meat. The horses themselves look a bit thin, but they continue to graze on natural grass, without needing anyone to cut it for them. Pigs are not kept in pens either. They're allowed to roam freely, limited only by a rope tied to a tree. These pigs are usually black, not the pink and white breeds many people are used to seeing, and they often lie in muddy, dirty water, a sight that feels strange to outsiders. When you head deeper into the forest, you'll encounter small ponds and streams. To cross them, you carefully step on the rocks beneath your feet. The water there is clear and cool, and you can even stop to take a refreshing swim. And once you've experienced all of this, we'd love to hear your thoughts about Cuba. What impression did Cuba leave on you? What part of this journey surprised you the most? Don't forget to share your opinions in the comments so Mystic Universe and everyone else can read them. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. And now, goodbye. See you again in our next exciting videos. Bye-bye.